Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to HC Live. For those of you all who are joining us, first and foremost, thank you for coming in on your afternoon. We are very excited to have you. My name is Colleen Baker. I am a producer here at the Houston Chronicle. And first and foremost, we want to make sure you all can hear us and there's no issues with the chat. We obviously have Sheriff Ed Gonzalez here, along with our amazing reporter, John Wayne Ferguson, to take your questions in a little bit. So first and foremost, we want to know where you are in Houston. Are you downtown at the sheriff's office? Hopefully not, but I know that's where the sheriff is joining us from. And John Wayne and I are reporting to you live from the Houston Chronicle. I do see someone saying hello, so I assume you can hear us, but let us know if you're in Montrose, Atascocita, Humble. I see far northwest Houston is logging on. Conroe is in, the Woodlands, Bel Air. Great. That means everyone can hear us. And for everyone who is on, make sure that you know we will be putting this up on YouTube, so you can always go back and rewatch it, share with those of us who were not able to attend. But we're here to talk about all things safety and Houston. So without a further ado, I will pass it on to John Wayne, our amazing reporter. John Wayne, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you, Colleen.
Go ahead.
Hey, Sheriff. Welcome to, I think, your first HC Live. It's mine too. So let's see if we can get through this together. It seems like a really good day to talk to you. Right before this meeting, I was watching the Commissioner's Court meeting, and they talked a lot about kind of the hot topic in your office, and that's possible raises and a real urgency for raises for your deputies. To kind of catch people up, Houston PD just passed, or the city of Houston just approved a new contract for its police union. Houston PD officers will be getting 35% raises over the next few years. There's reports of deputies from your office already looking to maybe go and try to join HPD because of the difference in pay. Commissioners this morning, if I understand correctly, decided to form a committee to study pay parity and how the county might get to that. But it could mean a lot of money. I think the number that was thrown out this morning was 140 million needed in the budget to get your deputies' pay up to the equal to HPD. There was talk about cuts. There was talk about possible tax increase votes. That's not all. You're not, you can't call a vote. You've been out there saying that these raises are needed, but if there's supposed to be a plan presented later this summer, what are kind of your hopes and expectations for this plan that might come together to get some raises for your deputies?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for convening us. I'm very excited to be a part of this, my first virtual dialogue. So I'm very excited to join you and the Houston Chronicle and the whole team. So thank you, Colleen, and everyone that makes it possible. But yes, pay parity, competitive pay structure is definitely top of mind right now for everyone. It's definitely for us an important issue, not only for obviously our personnel, but most importantly for public safety. You know, we operate within a large footprint. Many may not know that the unincorporated areas of Harris County are just as large as the incorporated areas of the city of Houston, for example. And so we cover a lot of territory, and we have to respond to a wide array of public safety threats in our region. And we want to make sure that we're ready to answer that call, us and our partners with the constables' offices as well, that when a citizen calls, that we're ready to respond in a timely manner and get the job done, that there's a professional response, and that we have the necessary deputies and constables as well to handle any situation that may come our way. So yes, our budget cycle is different than the city of Houston. So obviously our budget cycle is now underway in terms of reviewing the upcoming budget. And so we are asking for pay parity. Look, it's tough enough when we see agencies across the state and around the country increasing their salaries for their personnel, for their first responders. And so we commend that. We think it's a positive step to continue to professionalize our profession and make sure we're attracting the best and the brightest. And so we just want to be a part of that. We do not want to fall behind. The sheriff's office historically has always been way behind when it comes to pay, comparable to our neighbors and other agencies as well. So that's why the price tab keeps growing larger and larger, and it's not going to get smaller anytime soon. So now's the time to act. I'm very optimistic to see some of the comments by some of the members of Commissioners Court, as well as a very positive vote today to form that committee and really work towards pay parity. If not, we're really at a disadvantage, because what will happen is you'll just see a mass exodus when the pay disparity is so large. For example, an level deputy for us is right around 59,000, where an entry level police officer, let's just say our neighbors at the Houston Police Department, is around $81,000. That's entry level. They're not going to come to us when they could go right down the street. If it was elsewhere, then perhaps they'd think twice, but it's here just literally down the street. So we want to make sure that there's strong law enforcement across this region. We know that crooks that are out there, serious offenders, are not just staying in one community. They travel across the entire region. And so we've got to make sure that we have coverage all throughout. We're a very professional organization. We could respond to just about any number of threats, but for us to stay relevant and take care of our community requires this type of investment. And I know there's budgeting can be very challenging. But before we talk taxes or anything of the like, I imagine let's just look and see where we could find some efficiencies across an entire budget, perhaps some programs that have met their end of life, if you will, or perhaps we're ARPA funded and the funding just has expired. There's a number of different areas that we could look at, but my experience with budgeting has always been, and I had an experience with the City of Houston budget when I was Mayor Pro Tem and a city councilman, that you look at your essential services first. And I feel that public safety is indeed one of those safety is an essential service. And then from there, you may have to make some difficult choices down the line with some other things that are nice to have, but may not necessarily be a mandate or an essential service.
At the same time, do you have to plan? You talk about possible mass exodus. If you lose some deputies, and how do you deal with that? Do you have to at the same time be making a plan to triage what your guys do out in the field, and what programs you have?
Yes, I mean, I think the responsible thing to do is, as a police executive, it's, we always want to, we pray for the best, but we prepare for the worst. We have to have a wide perspective on this issue. Again, I'm always a half glass full kind of person. I'm optimistic about us being able to achieve this. I really believe it's doable in a responsible way to get it done. But I'm also realistic. Like, look, things could change course, or we could go in a different direction. Then we're going to have to course correct and just figure out how to maybe just sustain things. But it's not going to be a pretty picture. I'm not an alarmist by any means, but just simply, if you just have less people and call for service and volume remains the same, then it's just a very serious situation for our residents here in Harris County. And we're residents of the county as well. So it is concerning, and we'll prepare for just about anything that comes our way, but it's imperative that we get this done and get it done as soon as possible.
Can you really begrudge your deputies for if some men or women are out there already reaching out to HPD about that? Is that expected? I mean, when you first saw news of that contract, is that something you thought would happen?
It's not surprising. We've already seen anecdotally where some folks have started going to state agencies, even ISDs, for example, when the legislature really mandated that schools needed to have, police officers on site and things like that. There was a push to hire more. And so, we understand that, first of all, it's a tough market these days for a number of reasons to recruit capable men and women who want to enter this profession, for a variety of reasons. And so when they see that the market has really trended in a different direction and we're not even close, we want to make it competitive. We want people to have to think twice about what agency they may want to work for and work with. And so, it's not something that we take personal. We understand they have to make decisions for themselves and their families. It's a no-brainer if you think about it, when there's such a large pay gap. That's why every budget cycle since I became sheriff, I've really advocated as my number one priority to make sure that we were investing in pay raises. And you know what? I thank the Commissioners Court members over the years that have helped us for pay raises. and also to make sure that our detention officer pay, which was really in a serious predicament years back, to bring them up to par, and they've done tremendous. And across the board, even taking care of some of the lowest paid members of the workforce for the county have all been elevated, which is all positive, you know. But we can't forget our first responders, those that suit up every day, that put their lives on the line, that we call them whenever there's a severe weather event. We don't have the benefit of staying home and protecting our own property. We have to go out there and serve and protect and handle rescues and coordinate rescues, whether it be an industrial incident or a severe weather event, whatever comes our way, we're ready to serve and act. And that's we put a lot on our deputies and our deputy constables as well. So I can't blame them to want to look out for themselves and their family. But you know what? We're working very hard to make sure we close that gap very quickly. And we take pride in our agency. And again, since the beginning of time, this agency has always been behind other agencies. And I think it's time that we lead the way, or at minimum, have some pay parity going forward.
Last question on this topic. I think Commissioner Briones might have said that HPD was poaching people from your department. Is there anything you can say to Chief Diaz over at HPD or someone at City of Houston saying, "Hey, come on, man, like look outside the county, like these are my guys," or is that just not done?
Look, we talk to our counterparts all the time. We're working on major issues such as the upcoming World Cup and other major events. We work very collaborative. I don't know of another time in the city and region's history where so many agencies work so well. We really take pride in that. So hey, I commend them. They're very deserving. They're a great top-notch agency. I do want to make sure that we remain competitive because we want to keep our own people, but we don't blame them. We have some of the best trained professional people out there. So it would be crazy for them not to want to poach our folks, and I consider it an honor. But we want to make sure that we're up to par when it comes to pay, and if we do that, I'm sure, in fact, we may be able to turn the tables around, and they'll be seeking our agency. We're able to achieve pay parity because we have a pretty good reputation here in this region and actually around the country when I talk to colleagues around the United States.
Okay, got through that. There's a lot of other public safety topics to talk about, and I think maybe the best place to start is kind of where is kind of crime and public safety right now in Harris County. We are, what, 5 years after the start of the pandemic. We're 5 years after the death of George Floyd that happened this week. And I'm just wondering what your perspective is on how things compare today to where they were kind of at the heights of the pandemic, when we saw an increase in violent crime. We saw a lot of public disruptions and things like that. More recently, nationally and locally, we saw decreases in those things. But like, how are things going today compared to where they were the last few years?
I'd say that for the most part, I'm optimistic. I think we're in a good place right now. Obviously, for myself and for our agency, public safety is always our North Star. We wake up every day and just want to make sure that we're trying to mitigate any threats that are out there, and to continue to relentlessly address violent crime and go after those that are the most violent in our community. We've seen very good progress. Last year, for example, we saw a lot of double-digit decreases on some of our violent crime. Our clearance rates on homicide cases remain extremely high, perhaps the best in the nation. And I think one of the very positive things that we're seeing right now is a more effective and efficient criminal justice system. I always remind everyone that we have an ecosystem with many important cogs along the way, and we're starting to see now more trials that are taking place, which was very much needed. When the system starts to get clogged up, it really just creates a tremendous pressure on everything else. And like I always said, even at the height of some of the major issues we were having around the jail, and we're talking about staffing, and it's in so many ways, ironically, we didn't have a staffing issue per se. We had a jail population issue because when you're bursting at the seams and when you're mandated to operate within ratios in terms of your detention staff versus the number of inmates in house, of course, it's going to go up just the formula. It's going to require more staffing, and you had more people in house that were staying longer times, and we're all about accountability. Everybody should have their day in court, and I don't think it's one or the other. I think we could have a swift justice system that allows and maintains due process for those that are accused of crimes, but also is responsible to make sure that victims are getting the justice that they deserve, are able to go on with their lives. And so it really benefits the system. And if somebody's guilty of committing crimes, they need to be held accountable, and they need to be do their time in the state system, not get clogged up in a local jail system that was never designed to hold people for long periods of time.
I have a bunch of questions prepared about the jail, so I'm glad you brought that up. I looked this morning. Back in February, the jail population reached a height of about 9,700 people there. As of this morning, yesterday, it was down to about 8,900 people, which looks to be about the lowest point it's gotten to in terms of the local jail population since 2022, I think. You talked about this kind of correction. Is that all due to more trials happening, or is there other things you guys are doing to get that decrease happening?
Yes, jail population is definitely trending downward, which is a relief for us. And again, I want to just be very clear that when we talk about that, in no way is it something that we feel harms the public, where there's any kind of mass release or anything like that. It's nothing of the sort. It's just really looking at cases. We have a good working relationship with District Attorney Tier and his team, looking through cases. Cases that have been on hold for a long time are now moving to trial much quicker. And sometimes when that happens, just the system allows for more coordination in terms of, if people know that on one hand they're facing the possibility of trial and perhaps they want to go ahead and settle the matter and take a plea deal of some kind, then their counsel can work through that, because now you have basically a couple of options at hand, where before the possibility of a trial was something long term down the road, and so they would just kind of wait it out sometimes, because there wasn't necessarily a sense of urgency that perhaps down the road witnesses recant, they move on, whatever happens, and so they would just wait it out. And I think now we're seeing more of a movement. Now they're also more engaged up front to try to review some of those lower level cases, even though we are seeing an uptick with like homeless people being arrested, it seems. But nonetheless, they are vetting those like with a mental health nexus and things like that. We also have a diversion center that's been underutilized over the years. It's a great tool here locally. So I think it's just a variety of different things. Law enforcement continues to do its job. We're still seeing a high number of arrests, but I think the difference now is trials are helping move things a little bit quicker. And I think that's a positive thing, because the pressure is down for everyone, for our workforce, for the system, and you start seeing just better outcomes overall.
While the local jail population is down, there's still, I think it's about 1,500 people that have been outsourced to jails. I think all those jails are in other states now. How long is that program going to be sustainable, or when will the local jail population be enough to stop sending people to Louisiana and Mississippi?
Yes, I'm not in favor of outsourcing. When I took over in 2017, January 2017, this jail system was already outsourcing persons at a pretty high number. Within a few months, I was able to dial that back and eventually brought everyone back to Harris County. I think that's the right thing to do, both budget-wise as well as just the right thing to do for family members of those that have loved ones that are incarcerated, for those that are incarcerated. It's just good government just for us to be able to handle our own defendants here in house. So, one of the challenges when it came, as we were, just when our population was really at a brink, it was just we just simply didn't have the capacity here locally, and the daily churn of at times 300 plus defendants coming in daily, and with things getting clogged up, it was just a constant, you know, uh, capacity issue. And so we had to outsource at that point. It's not also by choice that we say, well, let's outsource to other states. It's simply there's just no capacity within the state. You know, a lot of stuff was happening with some of the state and other federal level that were taking up a lot of unused beds and other facilities for other, you know, immigration and other type of operations going on around the state. So capacity was very low. And then because of our volume, there's just not a lot of facilities that have 100, 200 beds to be able to accommodate. Said, yes, we have 200 beds available for you at plus, you know, so the only way we could do was go out of state. And so I've already instructed my team, because we're seeing positive trends in that and other metrics that we follow on a regular basis, to start unwinding, if you will, our outsourcing needs. And so incrementally, we could start now dialing it back. And my goal is to try to end outsourcing as soon as possible. It's not going to be in the next few months. We've got to maintain some of the positive momentum that we're seeing in the court system and the more trials and everything that I was mentioning. But we're definitely moving in the best, you know, trend line that I've seen in years. And so we follow a lot of different metrics. Average length of stay, for example, is the lowest that I've seen in a long time. We measure that. We continue to be the highest probably in the nation, definitely around the state. And that's not sustainable. That's a good metric that we track, and it's definitely moving downwards. So there's a lot of more efficiencies that court administration is also building in. And so again, it's an entire system, and it seems to just be a very positive momentum all around. We just have to sustain it. But I definitely think that by year's end, beginning of the new year, then I think that we could have a much reduced dependence on outsourcing, as for sure out of state. And hopefully, my goal is to have everybody back, you know, as soon as possible.
Is it a drain on, do you have to send your own like deputies to these other jails to get people back from them? It's part of their job to go out and on buses. Like how much of a workforce drain is it just for to have people in Louisiana, say?
Because we've done it for a while now, the mechanics of it, the logistics, it's a logistics situation. We have it working pretty seamlessly now. A lot of that is absorbed by our vendors that handle a lot of the transports and things like that. You know, obviously we do inspections from time to time as well. But then also we have to coordinate. It's a lot of coordination, because there's certain individuals that just don't fit the profile of what they can accept, because you know, it depends. You know, if they have certain elements or certain things that they just can't monitor and tend to. For example, they may not be able to fit the criteria. And because we have very transient, fluid type of population, where somebody may be here today and a few days they're gone, it's kind of hard to replace people. Some come back because they have a court case, then they get released, and then you have to backfill that one. So it's a constant coordination. So it's more time intensive in terms of logistics and things like that, but in terms of staffing intensive from our end, not so much, because we don't have to deploy a large arsenal of personnel to those facilities.
Last question on the jail. Do you think there's any possibility you're going to need a new jail building sometime in the future?
We are currently undergoing a planning process with county partners, with the direction of Commissioner's Court as well, just to start visioning what a future complex might potentially look like, just to manage expectations a little bit. We're not necessarily looking at creating a new, like, build it and they're going to come kind of thing, where let's just build a new big jail. You know, there's a lot of you have to look at the entire calculus and say, what's our population projections in you know, in the next decades. You know, those
You mean
type of
the county's population?
Yes, the county's population, because obviously the more people that come into our region, there's still going to be some element of crime out there. And so there's all types of factors, formulas that are looked at. You know, what I want to encourage, and I think would be a positive exercise, is let's reimagine what jails could be as well. You know, in a perfect world, I think it wouldn't be just one size fits all. For example, I'm a big advocate for us doing better in overseeing the women that are coming into our correction system. Women in corrections is the largest growing population in jails and in prisons, and jails are never designed for women in mind. And I think that if we could better address some of the addiction, some of the trauma and other things in a more holistic setting, like we're doing with our amazing Women's Empowerment Center right now, then I think we could see better outcomes. So the notion would be, for example, we don't have a detox center here in Harris County, and yet we see so much addiction, so much substance use disorder issues, a lot of co-occurring situations between mental health and narcotics. So perhaps creating a mental health unit that those that are arrested for some of those could be properly detoxed, something we do not have. And so, or maybe it could be an infirmary. Many of those that come into our jail are, prone to have hypertension, diabetes, other things that we have to manage every single day, to the tune of about almost $100 million when it comes to medical care, mental health care. It's very costly. And so we could create better design buildings and maybe renovate some of the existing facilities. We could then better, you know, put people in the proper setting that it's best for our taxpayers. We could actually save some money. And then two, we're hopefully returning people back to the community in a much better way. Because how do you want us to return your neighbors back to you upon release? Because at some point they will be coming back out, whether it be from county jail or at some point from the prison system. About 90% in all people that are incarcerated at some point will return to their community.
I know another sheriff who always called his jail the largest mental health hospital in his county, and I think that's pretty true.
Very much is.
Everywhere else.
Yeah,
I want
we
to
have
ask before we go
yeah,
ahead.
about 79% of our jail population has a mental health indicator, and about 70% are at least on one psychotropic type medication. So we're dealing with a lot of different intersecting issues that society, whether it be addiction, poverty, mental illness, and it's not to uh, we're not making excuses. I strongly believe in accountability, but the reality is that we have a high number. We have about uh, you know about 1,000 people right now that are designated as being homeless. So we're basically absorbing a lot of the homeless issues in our community. And to me, that's not the best setting. It's not the most cost effective, and it's not the best outcomes long term.
I wanted, before we throw it to some of the chat questions, I wanted to ask two questions about immigration in particular. Obviously, the Trump administration has made immigration enforcement a huge priority, a huge platform for them. We're seeing lots of news about arrests and deportations. How, as far as your agency, have things maybe been different in the last 5 months since the new administration took over?
For us, it was about basically continuing what we've done since the beginning. For us, we wanted to maintain a focus on violent crimes. When I first became sheriff, we assessed our programming as it related to immigration. And while again, I mentioned that we were outsourcing at a high clip, we were spending an inordinate amount of overtime dollars, and I had to get the budget in line. So we went to a model where we weren't physically doing that work in the jail, but we were allowing our federal partners to be in the jail and doing their side of the work. And that's what we've done, keeping an eye on individuals that were arrested. We've operated a jail-based system to this date. It's good collaboration. That's what our federal partners have asked of us. And so that's what our focus has remained. And obviously, we're always going to obey the law and carry them out. Some we agree with in at times, and at times we may not. But nonetheless, public safety, like I mentioned at the beginning, is always our North Star. So when we're called upon, we're going to assist as needed. So far, the focus has been on jail-based enforcement, which is what we've continued to do. And we'll continue to move along in that direction. And obviously, the federal partners and others have had their own mandates. And And so in this region, perhaps because we're so resource rich for the most part, where there's so many agencies and it's a big hub for law enforcement, perhaps the need is not as great. And because we have such an established system coming through our jail that, look, those that are arrested for anything, we don't care what it is, where they're from, they're going to be arrested if anybody's committing crimes in our community. Then when they land in our system, in our jail system, most likely through the vetting process and all that, they're going to be identified, and then ICE could, obviously move forward with their process.
My colleague Matt DeGrood reported on one situation involving Houston PD, where a woman approached an officer to report a car accident that happened, and in the course of investigating that accident, the officer called ICE because this woman, I believe, had an administrative warrant out for her arrest for not being in the country legally. Our understanding is that that's HPD is saying that they do what they always did, is that if someone has a warrant, they are acting on it. But it seems to go against some previous statements where the focus on immigration enforcement was on people who committed crimes, not on people who reported them. I guess my question is, have your deputies been advised on what to do about people coming to them to report accidents or crimes? Are they being checked for their immigration status, or how are you handling that?
Yeah, we haven't issued any formal guidance in terms of changing any of our policies or anything. Historically and typically, what happens is if somebody reports a crime, we'll take the information down. Obviously, we determine that there's a legit crime that was committed and is being reported, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're addressing any crime element in our community, again, regardless of who's at the source of it. We want people to feel comfortable to come forward and report crimes, to be witnesses and what have you. If it pops up during the course of an investigation that a person's wanted, then again, that's where it gets a little tricky sometimes, because warrants come in different there's different categories of warrants. Some may be more administrative, and those that maybe are more administrative warrants where it's like immigration related, uh, you do have a reasonable amount of time to perhaps notify immigration authorities that this person is wanted. And if, look, we're going to always use common sense, and we have to follow the law. We're trying to figure it out as well. We're not immigration experts. It's a different type of law. None of us signed up to do that type of work. But we also understand that, we have a public safety responsibility. If we come across somebody that does have some type of warrant that alerts us, that it's likely that a deputy may, based on their discretion, contact the authorities and say, hey, this is what I have. And again, if that's something that immigration will have to decide how to handle it. But because we have a jail-based system, if somebody's wanted on things and they're being arrested, for example, on a criminal charge for something, and there is a secondary warrant, they're still going to be brought up. But most likely how we interacted with them was because there was some type of criminal nexus to it. And because we have a jail here that does have the cooperation agreement with them, then a lot of times those things are resolved more in a jail-based setting rather than out in the field. I don't know the specifics of that specific address, traffic stop or crash investigation. I really don't know. So we're trying to figure out as well what the proper guidance is to give, because there's so much information out there about what's wrong or right. But it seems to have worked effectively, at least for our agency right now, of trying to balance maintaining public trust, but at the same time, we're gonna, cooperate as needed whenever there's a question of a warrant or something like that, then we're gonna let them try to vet it if that's what they feel is appropriate under the circumstances that they have.
Have you heard people saying, or have you got reports of people saying that they're scared to talk to police at this point?
I have
Or
heard
scared?
that. I've heard that. I've heard that anecdotally. Yeah. There's just a lot of misinformation, early on. A lot of the information was the fear, that, federal enforcement was going to include potentially schools and workplaces. Obviously, I think the messaging, has what really is, it's more targeted enforcement, to my knowledge. I'm not saying this 100%, and I can't speak for federal authorities, but my understanding and the information I got based on conversations I had with federal authorities is that it wasn't necessarily going to be focused on schools per se, but they weren't going to no longer be restricted if they had to pursue some type of suspect apprehension. They weren't going to be restricted by not being able to go into those locations. It didn't necessarily mean that they were going to proactively be in schools trying to locate people on a daily basis, just random type of checks, you know.
Mhm.
But again, that came from conversations I had with federal authorities.
Colleen, do we want to throw it to some questions from the chat?
Absolutely. We have had a lot of questions coming in, so I will jump straight through to them. The first that had quite a couple of people weighing in was on mental health specifically. So you'd already mentioned looking at detox options and buildings being adapted maybe in the future. You had maybe mentioned one resource that was currently existing that wasn't being utilized a little bit or being utilized as much right now. Can you speak to what that resource is or some of the resources that are currently in place that are not being utilized?
Yes, two immediate well, there's actually three that come to mind. One is we have the Ed Emmett Diversion Center. I believe it was in 2019 when we launched it, this county did, which is a diversion center where low level, these are nonviolent cases where perhaps a review indicated that the person had been cycled through the mental health system at some point, and we understand that perhaps they were in some type of crisis. And again, law enforcement is put in the untenable task of having to respond to those cases and do something about it where we have limited resources and capacity as well. So now we could divert instead of incarcerated. If the deputy feels that it's an appropriate way, they could use the diversion center, and instead of booking, they could take them to the mental health and clinical professionals to stabilize that person, get them back on track, and get them the help that they need instead of incarcerating people, because we shouldn't be punishing people because they have a mental health condition. And again, I'm not talking about violent individuals or us to giving anybody a free pass, but using common sense. Where somewhere out there, there's somebody that's probably butt naked, playing the air guitar in some park, just yelling their lungs out, and we're the only society that will incarcerate that person. And I think there's got to be better ways, because that's not a very cost-effective system to be clogging up our courts, clogging up our jails, paying a high premium for care when it should be treated more as a public health issue. So that's one issue. We also have a 24/7 diversion desk in the booking area where, again, low-level cases where we identify that somebody perhaps is there on a trespassing charge. That's a good indicator that it's probably some type of homeless type issue. Then we could also say, do we really want to clog up our criminal justice system with this particular case where there's no violence? Let's maybe, again, divert them to that center, rethink this particular charge. And so we could make more thoughtful discussions in a more, setting where we could think through it and look at some of the past history of the individual. Because all these systems cost a lot of money. And we've seen individuals where it cost almost $1 million when you look at ambulance care, health care, all these other expenses that are paid just trying to move this person from one place to another, and they end up in the same place. So we have to be more engaged in trying to make better decisions. And there's also a fourth responder model that we've been a part of the pilot. Commissioner Briones, Garcia, and others, Commissioners Court have been very strong advocates, Commissioner Ellis as well, where now sometimes in certain pockets where you call, traditionally it's police, fire, ambulance. Now you could ask for a fourth responder model where we might send a mental health professional or a social worker, if you will, to be able to address, again, somebody that may be in crisis, there's no weapon involved, and that person just needs to be de-escalated. The situation needs to be de-escalated. It may not require a law enforcement officer. In this country, for far too long, we've called on our first responders to go and handle those issues, and they weren't trained to do that. They're not paid to do all of that, and it's unfair to them. And there's got to be other ways to handle. So that's an idea, but we could talk about mental health all day. We have a wonderful jail-based mental health competency program because we are the largest mental health hospital by default, not by choice, in the state, then we have professionals that will help stabilize somebody that may not be fit to go to trial here locally. And instead of waiting months here just to get a state bed, and it takes another months at very costly rate, then we could stabilize them quickly here. We're seeing a 90+ success rate, enough to stand trial. They could go to trial, and then their case could be adjudicated one way or another.
Absolutely. Another theme that's coming up is youth and the population of youth in Houston. First question is mentoring specifically. What mentoring within your department and youth programs in Harris County are taking place right now? And the second is what programs are actually in place to help grow youth seeking a future in law enforcement careers? So two different types of angles there, but what's going on with, I guess, the youth outreach overall?
A wonderful question. Really speaks to my heart. One of the reasons that inspired me to want to become a police officer many, many years ago was I learned about the cradle to prison pipeline, and I wanted to do my part and try to dismantle that over the years. And so it really drew me to the profession to see what I could do. And I've learned quite a bit about some of the different entry points into the system. For example, we have over 1,200 individuals that are currently incarcerated in our jail that uh, were formerly in the foster care system here in our community. Every year, this may alarm you, Colleen, but we have 90,000 children in our county that have a parent that's incarcerated in our jail. And so these are all tough indicators that we have to be looking at because that's the future. It's going to impact our workforce. It's going to impact our jails. It's going to impact our safety. What are we doing? Just today, we announced 5 individuals that were arrested, all teenagers, went on a violent crime spree of robbing convenience stores and a restaurant at gunpoint, assaulting people. The 4 of them were 13, one was 15 years old, 28 charges filed on them. What are they doing? The criminal justice system has about 80 or 90 people currently detained, juveniles, for murder and capital murder. Those are juveniles. That's not the adult system. So something is definitely wrong here in our community. We got to get it right. And it really takes a village, all these different factors. We have programming that does target some of those kids that have a parent that's incarcerated in jail so that we could give them some mentoring and support. We do that. We have an advisory group that was launched by our Deputy Pantoja here at the Sheriff's Office, was very successful. We just completed the first cohort, learning about some of their challenges, about what they see out there with drugs, suicide, other challenges, violence that they see. And so we have that program as well. We still have an active Explorers program as well that recruits young teens that want to learn more about the profession. We give them kind of a soft entry into learning the ins and outs of our work, and many have gone on to serve as deputies. And then we also do other programming supporting schools and things like that. And we have a hiring event coming up in June, specifically catered for teens that are graduating that may have an interest in a law enforcement career and how we could perhaps find them a job within our system, and perhaps they could be our future deputies in the future.
Have there been any training programs or outreach programs affected by federal cuts? I think, again, the city might have lost some funding for a program like that. Have you guys been affected on that end by federal cutbacks?
So far, we haven't seen any of those impacts, for any of this particular programming. I haven't been alerted about any cuts so far that have impacted any of that. And, I think it's essential. We're seeing so much teen violence these days that it's something we're going to have to address proactively. I know Councilmember Willie Davis with the City of Houston has an initiative focused on teen violence. We participated in that. And so it's something that really, I think, isn't talked about enough. I know we talk a lot about the adult, jail and county systems and all of that, but not enough about teen violence. And it's definitely has my attention because we're grappling it quite a bit. And these teens are very impulsive and become very violent. So.
To go back to a point you made, how is becoming a police officer or deputy different nowadays than it was when you started? Like, what's the big difference?
Yeah, well, pay's becoming much better
Yeah.
now when I started. I think too, you talked a little bit about some of the unrest that had happened, obviously around, the murder of George Floyd and other things that occurred. And many, I think, perhaps got discouraged for different reasons. At times, maybe that they looked at the negative aspects of policing. For others, it's like just the scrutiny. I don't know of any other profession that is scrutinized as heavily. What happens in another part of the country could impact here locally, the views on law enforcement and policing and things like that. And so, and nowadays, that's a challenge, is recruiting people that want to do this. You have other companies such as Amazon and beyond that pay very well, entry level type positions where people could get a job fairly easy. And you also have a more transient work population as well. That not before, I came from an era that if you joined one police agency, you pretty much retired from that agency. You wanted a good, steady job, good benefits. Nowadays, the benefit part isn't, because we have great benefits at the county, but that doesn't necessarily resonate with somebody that's making career choices. And now they're not opposed to joining one agency and just going down the road to another one because it's smaller, it's more boutique, it's not as stressful, they run less calls, and so they do that. We have it on a pretty regular basis. Not huge numbers, but we do see it where they'll go work at a smaller agency just because of better quality of life, and can't blame them for that as well. There's much more attention now to self-care, mental health, and other things like that, and people have to do what's best for them.
And then what's the sales pitch to work for the Harris County Sheriff's Office? What's the benefit if there are boutique
Yeah, well, I mean,
police departments out there?
Yeah, one of the things that we really strive to do is really, we want to have a large menu of different opportunities within the sheriff's office. Obviously, we're very comparable to any large agency anywhere around the country, from specialized units such as the bomb units and SWAT. You've covered many scenes when they've been out there. Air support. We have a Marine unit in the Port of Houston for those that aspire more for outdoor type of activities. You have all your investigative bureaus, those that want to tackle and pursue human traffickers and drug traffickers and all of that. And then also trying to instill a culture. Hopefully, it takes time sometimes to do that, but really that grows leadership within the agency. Because yeah, you may go down to another agency that pays more, but you also want to be in an environment that hopefully, as we continue to move, is trying to empower more of its leaders to have more of an active role in decision making, to problem solve, to have learning opportunities that perhaps they weren't, that aren't always readily available, especially if you're on the lower ends of rank. Don't always get to go to conferences and learning opportunities. We're trying to cultivate that where, yeah, you may go down the road, make more money, but you're not really a part of really doing other things within the agency that are really going to build and add to your own professional development. And at the end of the day, I think there's an innate need that people have to want to grow as people, as leaders. And if we could invest more in that, then hopefully that's something where they'll choose not to leave. And even now, like I mentioned, historically, we've been behind the Houston Police Department and others, and we haven't had a mass exodus because I think that people see that we are trying to be a professional agency, and we do things, by and large, we do a lot of good things, and I think people have chosen to stay. There's a rich tradition at the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and so I think many want to do that. But again, like we mentioned earlier, just, you got to look at pay, and the wider that gap becomes, it could be the greatest place on earth to work. You're still going to look at the financials, and we got to do better.
Actually, here's a little bit of a fact checking as well. So John Wayne, I might go to you first. Someone was asking, the Harris County's Criminal Justice Coordinating Council announced a recommitment to cite and release last year. What has it done to see that through? And will this recommitment include a data collecting and reporting component? There's a lot in that, but I guess, John Wayne, do you want to take it away first? Is there anything about that that's not
I think the
accurate?
sheriff might have expertise on this. I'm afraid I didn't write. I haven't read of the coordinating council in a while.
Okay.
So
Can
Sheriff,
you speak to that, Sheriff, if that's accurate? Is that currently the case?
I didn't attend the last meeting. I had a representative at that meeting. I believe I was out of town for that one, but for the most part, I've been advocating for cite and release for a while. The state under Governor Perry, passed it years ago with about 12 different specific, lower level type of offenses that would be applicable. And again, to me, it's an efficiency thing. It's about letting our deputies have an option of issuing a cider release with certain criteria to ensure safety, instead of clogging up the court system. Just let the person, give them a citation, appear in court and handle their business, instead of going through the whole costly system of incarcerating and clogging the system if it's not something that automatically should merits an arrest. And it's something that's already provided by state law, and many other entities allow it. So I've been advocating for years about this. And yeah, it should have the proper, we should be able to measure it, look at the different metrics on it, if that's a specific question. So I'm glad that the council is still looking at it. I believe there's an opportunity for it, and if it is, we'll absolutely try to do better. We've done it to a very, very small extent. I would have liked to have done more. It was just not effective in the way it was set up. And again, as I've said, it requires multiple county partners to participate in it. Not participate to want to do it, because I, for one, would like to have our deputies with that option, but the rest of the systems need to be aligned, like to be able to have a court that accommodates those citations and things like that.
When
I
you
don't know
talk
if
about
I specifically answered.
a program that's allowed by state law, and people being released, like those kind of terms also remind me of the bail discussion that's going on. There's a new bail bill that's coming that could potentially allow judges to keep more people in jail without bail or bond. We spent a lot of this conversation talking about keeping the jail population down in a trend. Have you considered how that bill might affect what you're doing with the jail? I mean, like, is this going to be more people being kept, in your jail right when things are getting a little better?
Well, look, I think these are important policy discussions that are very fascinating. And yeah, look, unfortunately, we have a fragmented type of system. I've always said that in a perfect world, we would have what I describe as an intentional based system of corrections, where we as Texans, where we as Harris County residents we would say, you know what, we don't want repeat offenders to be out in the streets committing crimes, committing armed robberies, all these things. We want to make sure that they stay in jail. And you know what, we're going to work to address that. On the flip side, that there's also a recognition that not everybody that comes through jail is some violent serial killer that's going to harm people. They made some type of mistake. They overdrank. They, are you
Mental health issues, yeah.
yeah, mental health issues, all these other factors, but yet we address one, but then we don't address the other, and so it's very hard to say, until we have a perfect system, we're not going to advocate for this. Look, at the end of the day, I think it's very important that I've always said we need to make sure that really the jails are there to hold the most violent, your chronic offenders, those type of serious situations. And overcrowding really puts a burden on our personnel, everybody, to manage everybody, because we're grappling with everybody's issues. So yeah, it could lead to some more increased bookings when it comes to that. But if those are your serious offenders and chronic offenders, and a judge could potentially make a better decision in keeping those persons behind bars, then I'm all for it, and we need to make sure we do that. But I think that we also can't be naive to think that money alone or any of those other factors keep people safe, because I think so often that is misunderstood. Because if you have money and you could pay a bill, you could get out. It doesn't matter what your risk is. But if you don't have money and you can't afford it, then you stay in jail. Right now, as we speak, we have about 1,400 individuals that have a bond, if I'm not mistaken, $10,000 or less, meaning that if they could afford $1,000 today, they would be out the street. It doesn't matter what their risk factor is. Clearly, if they just had $1,000, 10%, they'd be out today. So they get, and we have to be feeding them 3 times a day, protecting them, doing all these things, keeping them healthy, providing all this top-notch mental health and healthcare and stuff. That's our taxpayers that are funding that. And so, to me, if somebody could get out if they had $1,000, then are they really a threat to society, if you will, if the bond has already been set? And so we have people that are,
I think on the flip side,
people that are 60-something-year-old, our geriatric unit that, they're 60-something years old. We have people here on technical violations because they failed a urinalysis, test, and we're working, just failed it, I had one gentleman that was a veteran, senior, 60+ years. He goes, Sheriff, I like marijuana. I'm not gonna lie, I do, but I was working, and law enforcement went and arrested me at my job because I had failed a urinalysis test, and I'm back in jail. I mean, is that really what we want to be doing?
Well, are you gonna, speaking of bills that are passing, THC might be illegal completely again in Texas soon. That's another thing I'm sure your department's gonna have to grapple with and probably see an influx of, right?
Yeah, and that goes back to my point earlier, is that unfortunately we have all these competing bills and things that sometimes add to population. I wish there was as much of a focus on mental health and addiction and things like that to really treat those things. We need more community-based responses to that. We should not have veterans, military veterans, Memorial Day's coming up, you know, we should really honor our men and women where we could address PTSD and other issues out in the community, when and properly diagnosing that up front. Instead, they end up being diagnosed after the fact when they've committed some type of violation or were intoxicated or something. They end up in jail, and then we diagnose them with PTSD. Like, what a shame that they fought for our country, yet they find themselves behind bars. Now, if somebody's committing a violent crime, look, let's hold them accountable. I'm all for law and order and all that, but I'm also empathetic for somebody that is grappling with an addiction or mental illness or things like that. To me, it's not one size fits all. We could find other options for them and better use that money for pay raises, to put more boots on the ground in the community so there could be a bigger presence, deal with our dangerous roadways, for example, deal with domestic violence. That's a pandemic. We could put more resources to that. Operating a jail system, the largest one in the state, second largest in the country, is very, very costly bureaucracy.
On the note of Memorial Day, I would be remiss if I did not ask, Sheriff, do you have any plans for Memorial Day, either to stay in town, spend time with family, or are you traveling?
I'll be in town. We'll be busy. We just earlier announced our multi-agency DWI initiative. So, it's something that unfortunately, Memorial Day marks the unofficial start of summer and what's often been described as the 100 deadliest days between Memorial Day and Labor Day weekend. And as you know, it's been well reported, we typically lead the nation when it comes to fatal crashes. So we'll have a large presence out there. I do hope to have a little bit of downtime, between Sunday and Monday. But I think, again, we just tell everybody out there, look, enjoy the holidays. It's a time for friends, family, but, remember the reason, why we come together. It's to honor and mourn those United States service members that lost their life, while serving our country. And we want to honor them. And the best way to do that is to be responsible, stay safe. And so that's primarily what I'll be doing, and just, out there working some, and trying to relax when I can.
Yeah, we have one reader specifically asking you, what do you actually do for fun or to de-stress?
I know everyone always asks me, like, do you ever sleep? But I like reading. I'm an avid reader. I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm always like, reading things. I love history, so like to look at documentaries, and I like
What's the book on the nightstand right now? What are you reading?
Yeah, one of the books that I have is I have Jocko Willing's Extreme Ownership. It's one that I always read. It's a leadership book. I also have one by former General McChrystal as well, on leadership as well. I like leadership books quite a bit, and but also like films. I like walking. Used to run a lot more. I'd like to get back into running, so I hope to do that. I like the outdoors, so if I could squeeze in some occasional walks, I need to do more of them. One of the things, that we need to really remind all first responders is just the need for self-care. And I know it starts at the top. We can't give from an empty cup. I'm not always the best at it, but we have to take those moments of time where we could just pause from the craziness of everything we see, and just go and get some fresh air, go for a walk, things like that. So try to relax as best I can, and that's what I'll be doing.
Absolutely. And with that, I think Memorial Day is a perfect segue for that time to maybe find some time to, like you said, work, but some de-stressing can be on the books as well. So
Yes.
Within the next couple seconds, this is a really important question. I want to make sure we get to it. If you could just say quickly, your top 3 priorities looking into the next 12 months, what would they be?
Well, I mean, 3 is kind of tough. We have a lot. Look, violent crime, protecting our communities is always our most important thing. Up there, obviously, is getting competitive raises, pay parity. For our deputies, it's up there because, in order to continue to keep our community safe, we have to have well-paid deputies and deputy constables. So those go hand in hand. It's not that one is more important than the other. They're both equally important. We have to continue to do more to keep our roadways safe. Like I said, we announced our multi-agency DWI initiative. We have so many fatal crashes that occur in our region. We've got to do better at that. And then also addressing what continues to be an epidemic when it comes to domestic violence, intimate partner violence. We see a lot of that. And we definitely have to continue to push that. We also have a lot of incidents of suicide in our community. That's probably number 4, but we see a lot of that. We saw it within our own ranks. And then obviously we see it in our community, children as young as 10-year-olds that are taking their lives. And so there's a lot, on our plate, but, it's an honor to be able to serve in this capacity. But we're going to continue to work hard every day for the citizens and residents of Harris County.
Absolutely. And with that, we have a lot of the readers also chiming in to say thank you for your service. Of course, we would also like to thank you for your service and your time specifically today with us on HC Live. And obviously, of course, to John Wayne Ferguson, our reporter as well. Like I said at the beginning, we will have this conversation up on YouTube for you to go back and watch and or share amongst your friends and family. We have a lot of upcoming events after Memorial Day. We've got everything from how to buy a house in Houston, as well as other VIP guests like the sheriff down the way as well. We'll have a big vouchers and Texas legislature recap. So stay tuned. Follow us on the HoustonChronicle.com website, on the HC Live newsletter. And John Wayne Ferguson will continue to cover, of course, the sheriff's team and his work. And thank you again to everybody for joining us today. And stay safe. All right, you guys take care.